Lanarkshire is a community radio station governed by the registered charity Getting Better Together Limited. Therefore, the radio station itself retains political neutrality, and any political views or comments aired as part of political discussion programming or otherwise are not the views of Listen Lanarkshire, nor of Getting Better Together Limited. The station has a set of key commitments found on the Ofcom website, and we adhere to all necessary Ofcom rules. For more information or inquiries, please contact us at radio@shotshealthyliving.com.
Welcome back to What's the Point, the show where power gets challenged, questions don't come pre-approved, and Scottish politics finally gets the sharp edge it's been dodging for years. I'm your host, Greg Lennon, still unwhipped, unfiltered and unfazed by the usual suspects in the North Lanarkshire Chamber. And speaking of suspects, of course, I'm joined as always by the Beelzebub bowler himself, Jerry Brennan. A man so allergic to silence he once heckled a planning report. He's the only guy who thinks opposition business means turning up in a cravat and a pair of Crocs. How are you, Jerry?
Very well, Greg, and as always, it's an extraordinary pleasure to be here with you.
Do you know, I actually got an email in that said, when's he going to change his pattern? That's what I get.
Never, Gregory, never, son.
Never gets old.
It's here, it's perpetual.
Well, now let's talk about the man of the hour, and no, not Jim Logue. Though, if he's listening, don't worry, Jim. We won't mention how you mute microphones more often than move motions. You'll be relieved to know that we've invited someone who actually wants to talk to the public. Tonight's guest needs no stage, no script, and certainly no party whip. Tamdeen Byrne, actor, activist, lifelong rebel. From the theatre to the picket line, Palestine rallies to community protests, Tam's voice has always carried that rare thing in politics: principles. These days he's backing your party, the new Corbyn-aligned movement out of Glasgow, trying to give socialism its spine back, Jerry. Not polished, not plastic, but passionate. Tam, how are you?
I'm very good. Yes, what an intro.
He's getting quite good at this. He's getting quite polished.
You think I've done this a few times?
I've been working on him for a wee while.
You think I've done this? So tonight we're going hard, broken promises, co-opted symbols and stitched up left, and when there's still time, courage to build something new, Jerry. So over to you, Jerry. We've got an absolute star of stage and screen.
Stage, TV, films, music.
Oh, music, yes.
Music too.
Yes.
Once described in the Glasgow Times as the scariest man on TV.
I would agree.
So, Tam, where to begin? I'm going to pass it over to you from the beginning, because what an illustrious career. Political activism, acting, music. How do you arrive here at this point?
Christ, I mean, I can't even remember yesterday, never mind the way back. It's funny, I was trying to think of, because I've watched your show a bit and that as well, and seeing the way you would maybe start, with the sort of questions you'd maybe ask, and I'd thought, I remembered seeing it with Neil Finlay. You said, how did you get started in politics or that as well? And I was thinking about it, and it often does come to my mind about how did I ever get the mindset that I was sort of a political animal? Because it's not in the family, really. It's not. My mother was always never discuss religion or politics.
Wow.
And my dad was a lovely man and wouldn't he say booty a goose or that at all, and so there was never any sort of political discussion going on. Now, my cousin Lynn Henderson, she's been big in the trade union movement, right. But no our side of the family in that, and so I was remembering that probably the first politics that I picked up really was at the football, right. Was being a Hibs supporter. That at that time, this is sort of in the 70s, it was rebel songs. We'd be singing rebel songs, and I knew that this guy James Connolly had been a Hibs supporter, and so I became aware of those type of politics, and seeing that the difference between us and Hertz was that like we were supporting the rebels, and the Hearts were known for being the team that supplied soldiers for the First World War, and I could see that contrast with us, that we were, you know, on the opposite sides of the fence. That sort of got balls rolling for me a bit. But what I just discovered in more recent years was that I was pretty brainy at primary school and that as well, and we would have prize giving.
You're in good company.
Yes, I could tell that, of course.
I've been carrying on for years, Tom. I've been carrying on for years.
But we would get books for being. I was always, me and Linda Taylor were first equal in the class in primary every year, except the last year, and where I became first on my own. But we would get taken up to Finn's bookshop on the bridges and be able to pick books. And I didn't really, you know, we weren't a reading family either as well, and that they were just to be sort of decoration and that as well. But I picked up on these sort of boy adventure bits a bit with Just William books,
right,
and these Jennings books. And I thought, you know, in more recent years, I thought, what was that I got into about this sort of boy at boarding school and his pals? But when the guy who wrote them, Anthony Buckridge, when he died, I read an obituary on him, and they said that he had a lifelong love of theatre, and he was a lifelong socialist.
Right.
And he put both of these things into the books, and I thought, that maybe is what it is. That's where I got the idea of acting and socialism.
So, your first venture into party politics, am I right in saying that was with the Communist Party?
Aye, yeah. I went to the Soviet Union with my pal Johnny McDougall,
right,
and who I think she lived in Bells Hill. Possibly her family were there. The McDougalls, maybe.
Lots of McDougalls in Bells Hill.
Yeah, but we went on. She found it on Progressive Tours, which was the travel agent of the Communist Party. A trip to the Soviet Union, and we could afford it, and it was gone for Christmas '83 into New Year 1984.
Right.
So we thought it was all going to be all trade unionists that we were going to be with, but they had geared it towards young people, and there was a whole big posse for Liverpool that were involved with the band Echo and the Bunnymen, and
right,
that as well. And I'd been involved in the punk scene in Edinburgh, so we all hit it off like that, and it had a really big effect on me. And when I came back, I started to look around for a sort of political organisation. The Communist Party at the time was in a pretty bad state, and I couldn't really find my way into it. But the miners' strike really, you know, with that happening, really got me going. And I came across a paper, another comrade who was friends with Chilean communists that had moved to Edinburgh. So I was picking up on these ideas. And this paper called The Leninist, I thought, God, this looks the type of thing that I'm after. I loved what they were saying about the importance of that strike, right, in that the minor support groups were potentials for councils of action, as there had been previously, that the women against pit closures was a new phenomena as well, of women really getting involved in strikes. And the miners' hit squads were showing that they had to organise to be able to defend themselves. Yep. So they were picking up on that. And so I started to see these guys operating. And then I moved to London at the beginning in 1986. Acting-wise, I'm just ready to be able to go for something fresh. And my partner at the time, she was in London. And these guys were based in London. They were a very small sort of faction within the Communist Party, and I got involved with them, and they sort of let me run with the whole idea of sort of workers' theatre movement, we called it. I got in touch with Ewan McCall, you know, a dirty old town and that as well, and
a fine musician.
We started doing agitprop sketches on the streets about the poll tax and all that sort of thing, and we found the big difference between us doing it and when Ewan McCall had been doing it was the noise that went on with traffic and all that as well. We got megaphones. We started using megaphones and making them into sort of masks and using them as part of the scene and all of that as well. So that I was was getting the opportunity, I was getting encouraged to run with the idea of combining culture with politics and that as well. And that's what I've sort of done as best I can ever since, really.
Have you dabbled in mainstream politics, or has it always been on the...
Well...
I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you anyway.
No, I mean, probably closest. We ran a club called the Manifesto at the Old Traverse Theatre in Edinburgh, leading up to, would have that been? It was the election with Michael Foot, anyway.
Right.
That
90, no, can it go...
No,
87?
87, yeah, it would have been. And that, so we sort of supported him because he was sort of oppositional and he seemed to be quite lefty. But without joining all that, I was very sort of anarchistic and all that as well. But in the 92 election, I stood for the Communist Party of Great Britain in Glasgow Central as a sort of, as a sort of agitational exercise to show that there were still communists around, because it had all fallen apart with the collapse of the Soviet Union and all that. So yeah, I stood as the candidate in that, but I'd carried on. That I've moved back up to Scotland to get that campaign going, and then Timex happened, and I sort of got really involved with the Timex. I got arrested on the first big picket there. When we were on the picket and the cops had managed to get the gates open and the bus was getting its way through.
Is this the Spider-Man story?
The scab bus was coming through, and I just thought, I'm just going to jump on and give that driver jip. Anyway, so I jumped onto the front of the bus and I held onto the windscreen wipers, and then this photograph got taken. The cops are pulling my hoodie at the back, and I'm heading on the air, and because it looked like I'd just plastered myself onto the windscreen, I did get the name Spider-Man.
You did
there, and we got banged up for the night, and then we got fined 250 quid, I think it was, and that as well. But the bail condition was that you are not allowed to enter the city of Dundee. And
wow.
Yeah, and all these people say, "Oh, you're lucky, so and so."
I love Dundee.
Didn't they have good press at the time, Dundee? But I then moved up there and got involved in the Timex support.
Where did you stay in Dundee? I lived in the Hilton for a wee bit.
Yeah, it wasn't far from there. It was on Lockheed Road.
You're on Lockheed Road.
Right, yeah.
And then I lived in Forfar Road, just at Morgan Academy. Across the road from Morgan Academy. I love Dundee. Still go up regularly.
It has a sense to itself that no other places in
absolutely.
Scotland do. And it was somewhere that we had family in that. We used to go on holiday up there when I was a kid and that as well. But I've always been really fond of the place.
So one more.
Go for
one
it.
more. So
Go for
an
it.
avid cyclist as well. This man. And the cycling challenge in 2014 cycled round Scotland reading stories from Julia Donaldson, the book she wrote, books like the Gruffalo, etc., which I read to my kids fondly as they grew up, and Stickman and all that kind of stuff.
Well, it was just like suddenly life threw a sort of curveball, because you had said about me, I don't know if it was on the one that we'd never managed to...
They just blend into it.
About scariest actor in Scotland and that as well. So that had been because it tied in with River City and that Brady Gangster and all that sort of thing. But then, because of River City, above all, being a character in that, the campaign that was going on to save this piece of land that had been old sports pitches, tied in with the school that had shut down in the West End, had got overrun, and the community had started using it initially with their dogs and all that as well. But then the community said, "We love this piece of land," and they said, "We're going to try and save this from developers and that as well." So it was into battle with the council, and their real coup was calling it the Children's Wood. It had been North Kelvin Meadow and then the Children's Wood, because how could you take back this from the children, for God's sake? But there was a brilliant woman, Emily Cutts, was a real driving force in leading this campaign, and she does brilliant work now up at with G20 Youth now. But she had the idea that let's see about getting Tam to come and read the Gruffalo, because Julia Donaldson was supporting the campaign, had said this is an outdoor community centre. So by reading the Gruffalo, the families would come along, you know,
and all the kids
sure
come
enough,
along with them, absolutely.
My God, it was amazing. And we had just moved back up to Scotland. My missus, she'd got a job up here, and we were starting to get settled, but didn't really know very many people. This just opened up the whole community to us, because we had a wee one as well. And it was just an amazing campaign that I thought we're never going to win here, because you know, I'd been a communist, and that I knew it was like I was St. Jude, patron saint of lost causes. We're on here, but because we had the walkway and we had the botanics and that, but what I wasn't appreciating was something that was run by the community. It completely transformed the whole approach to it and everything like that as well. And so I started reading these books, and then discovered all these songs that she's got as well, Julia Donaldson, and the tunes were all there. And another local musician, Andy Alston, who's in the band Delamitri, he started playing the squeeze box. Well, my missus played the flute, so we had a wee band doing these songs. And then 2014 comes along. There's going to be a cultural programme with the Commonwealth Games. So I got the idea, because I saw how many books Julia Donaldson had. At that point, it was 186 books.
Very prolific.
So, and all these songs, and I said, right, we'll put in a proposal. We will follow the baton. Otherwise, gone ruin Scotland. I started off calling, at first it was called the baton round. We'll follow the baton round. But we followed the baton that was going to every local authority.
I had it in my house. I had the Olympic torch.
Yeah.
I had it in the house. I went through. I lived in Newton Grange, mining town. So you're talking about the miners' strike and all the rest of it. All still very alive and knitting. And the baton went through Dalkeith. And somebody got hold of it from the community council, and we got it in the house. So I got all my
that was where it sort of just started, because it had gone from Edinburgh, and I had just been doing this mad programme called Fortitude, filming in Iceland, and I'd got the job through I knew the writer on it, Simon, and he had said Tam's perfect for this nutter character, and. So
can you get one for him?
Yeah. But I got that. So we had already lined up that we were going to do this, following the baton round, and I'd sort of gilded the lily by saying, and I will cycle as much as possible, and that as well. We called it Books on a Bike. Right. And, I mean, we were trying to keep up with the baton, which had a police escort. That we had a camper van, and so the bike was on the back of the camper van nearly the whole time. But I had to say to these people in Fortitude, okay, I'll take the job, but I have got to be back in Scotland in order to take this job up. There's no problem, we'll get you back. And then the night before, it was the final scene that I had to do, and it was this sort of nasty rape scene where I had this woman handcuffed to a bed and that as well. And then the next morning, I was in the Children's Wood with Julia Donaldson reading her new book, Superworm. So we had an absolutely fantastic time travelling around Scotland. It was just the weather was so idyllic, 2014, and we were started off completely knackered round about there in Edinburgh, but we found our feet on it. And those 40 days and 40 nights across Scotland, and then during the games itself, Glasgow was completely transformed. And then they got me to cycle at the opening ceremony around the stadium and that as well, waving to the crowd. And I thought, God, life is amazing.
So I'm going to come in now, Jerry, because I want to kind of fast forward that to now, because obviously a very prolific career, Tam. Loads of fascinating points in there. But now you're involved in Jeremy Corbyn's iteration of your party, and what that now means and what that looks like in Scotland. Because I think the news breaking out is it's kind of disjointed. It's still in sort of internal battles, all these different things. But when you speak to people, and you speak to people in the street, there is a hope out there in relation to a socialist party coming forward.
Yeah.
Where does it tell us a bit about your party?
Well, I joined the Labour Party when Corbyn got in. That was the first time I'd really been in, within that type of world, really, and that as well. But I dived right into this as well, because it has the possibilities of what I think we so desperately need, which is a mass communist party. We need to really be able to very quickly be able to change the world, because I'm very close with a guy called Bill Maguire, who's his book Hothouse Earth. He understands the whole climate question and how desperate things are going to get very soon. That, combined with one of the early lessons I learned at this, the Communist Party taught me at the time, was that we had 2 world wars in the 20th century, and caused by the general crisis of capitalism, and a 3rd world war is inevitable if we don't stop it. And so we're dealing with things on such a massive scale that it needs a world party, but we have to do it where we're placed. We have to, do it in our own communities, and be able to move it from there and set examples and give people the confidence that the things can and must change. We need revolution, that good old thing. That it appears as if everything's against that, but it's the only hope. It's capitalism we're taking on.
So your party, obviously, as I said, like anything that's in its infancy, because that is where it's at the moment. Where would you see your party being in relation to the Scottish Parliament election? We had Tommy Sheridan on last week, and we were talking to Tommy Sheridan. We highlighted to Tommy Sheridan. Tommy's obviously working on the premise at Alba, having this de facto sort of referendum. It's a plebiscite election. We're going to be nationalists, and all the nationalists are all going to come into that parliament, and that gives the sort of mandate to be able to hold a referendum. And the question I posed to Tommy Sheridan was, well, we've got the rise of your party. That's going to be something, whether we like it or we don't like it, that is going to be something in the political landscape. Tommy's position on that is we have to be honest and upfront with the electorate. You have to be a nationalist party, but there's no nuance in there. And I see your party potentially, maybe I'm wrong and you can correct me on this, but potentially being that nuance in there, because obviously the leader, Jeremy Corbyn, has highlighted it's for the Scottish people to decide this constitutional question. Where do you think it sits? Do you think that nationalism, socialism, communism to a certain degree, are these all interlinked, or can we separate? Is it a case that your party is a British party?
No, it's an international. It has to be looking on internationally, that it's not just Britain, but that's why fundamentally didn't want to then be leaving the EU, because it was the possibility of a common state, of having a communist party of Europe, was at the very least is what we're needing as quickly as possible. And I just see nationalism of any sort, almost, apart from this particular points where it's nationalism of oppressed peoples that demands support. But all the nationalism that is going on in Scotland is, to me, a diversion from what we need. It's as much a diversion as Brexit was. People get caught up in thinking that there are these possible solutions that are diversions from what we need. I think that we've got to be thinking on a scale that's beyond we've got to take on the British state. I mean, it's like one of the oldest, and most corrupt but solid states there is. It's where we've got to be fighting, at least on that scale, and that's what I would hope. I see there is a lots within that are saying, yes, we need to go, and that's no stopping us standing elections. I'm not in any way of that, but I'm hoping that we can operate on what I picked up on was people were saying 80-20 principle. And I thought they were saying 1820. I thought, what an uprising. What they were saying is, what about there's the 80% that we have in common? There's the 20%, which they fundamentally mean is independence question, that we don't have to deal with. Now I'd say we do have to deal with it, but I'd hope that we can be on the basis for this point for going forward on where we can be in the same party and say, yes, of course, Scottish people have the right to self-determination and that as well. But do we actually, it's like divorce, do we need it? Do we actually need it? Is it a positive force for us? That we don't need to be overtly pro-independence. That's you know, and I'm looking at the ways in which I'd already debate with people as much as I can online and things like that as well. But it's going to be one of the key questions. But I hope we can be mature about it and see that we have got so much more in common and no get caught up in this diversion.
I think again, and as I said, Tam, I have to put a disclaimer out there for you just now as well. You're not the official spokesperson.
No, in any way. The whole thing's so fluid in that as well.
This is a chat, and it's a chat. You just have a wee bit more insight.
Purely expressing
your own opinion. So the point that I would make in it is, given the fact that Scottish politics has been dominated by that constitutional question since 2014. We've not really moved on at any stage.
Dial's no shifting.
It's no moved at all. So really there is a hotbed in Scotland where that will always be a prominent point. Whether we like it or whether we don't like it, it's still going to be the make-up and the part of Scottish politics. What is it about now that your party thinks it can change in Scotland? What is it, do you think, that is really the main motivation here?
Well, I think it is that people are so frustrated and terrified of the what is potentially to come. Not just the sort of the thuggery or the sort of the far right or that as well. Of course, there's enormous dangers in that, and seeing that people are worried about reform and that, but also just on the bigger scale, what we're seeing, we're moving closer to World War III almost every day, and also the whole question of the climate, that as well. But people are looking for the means in which we could all be coming together, and that's what this offers, because suddenly 800,000 people signed up to be part of something. Because I do believe in a party. I think that we desperately need a working class party that is fighting purely for working class interests. And this is a possibility towards that. It's going to be awfully tough. But I think we need to be thinking on unity as much as we can and ways forward, and thinking internationally what we can contribute. And no get too caught up in the differences and about that idea that we're so different in Scotland, because we're no really.
Right. But do you think it's still possible for a sort of socialism as a mass movement to continue now? Because if you look at Labour's history over the last 20-30 years, it's been an absolute erosion of the socialist movement.
Social democracy
took it away. So even within the momentum sort of element within the Labour group, they tried to push that socialist communist agenda back out into the fore. But right now it seems as if that's fell by the wayside. I suppose the point that I'm trying to get to is, if it's a case that, let's say, your party stands candidates in the Scottish Parliament election tomorrow, who will they work with and who will they not work with in that Scottish Parliament? Because ultimately, if the agenda's still dominated by independents, the SNP, in my opinion, are the devolution management team. They're never ever going to push for independence. Let's not kid on about it. So the position is, would the SNP be more palatable than the Labour Party, or is it a case of full cooperation that would be looked to be struck?
Well, I mean, there's going to be tactics involved, but also then there are principles, and I think that it should be a principle that that your representatives in that parliament are only on the average wage. They're not in it as careerists. They're not allowed to operate like that.
A lot of squeaky bums in North Lanarkshire after they comments. I just heard the number of pair of pants.
We're taking him by the hand into Civic Centre tomorrow morning.
And recallable as well, being able to have on that score. But they also, that then if we were ever in the position of forming the government, that then you've got to have a minimum programme in place that has to be then fulfilled, which would include things like a federal republic or that. And we've got to have these sort of what might be considered high politics, like abolition of the monarchy, the House of Lords, all of that type of stuff has got to be there from the start, because we've got to learn the lessons. So all these organisations that like Syriza, saw in Greece, when you try to run capitalism, it inevitably fails, and it fails the socialist idea in that as well. So you've got to be able to be in a position of strength, but you can. It's much more positive to be able to have a form of election like you have in Scotland, rather than the first past the post. And I think we should. I would totally be up for us standing. Next, is it May? May. Aye. Yeah. I mean, there is time for that, and I think it really sort of girds us and gives us a focus to be able to. And I would really hope that we do, but I really hope that we don't. They do what the Tusk, the people around that. There's a few groups that are around the Scottish Socialist Party and that. Yeah. They're intending to stand. They want to do sort of deals of who's going to stand where and what that as well, it sounds like. But they voted down a proposal from the Scottish Left Alternative, which is another thing that has been going on at the moment, that I've sort of signed the open letter to, and that as well, that said it should be Scotland's right to self-determination, but without laying out we are for independence. Yeah. They've gone for that for independence, so I'm just hoping that we don't follow suit on that score.
Tam, you've said some really interesting things. I wasn't probably expecting to hear as much about communism tonight. Now, that's your perspective, and there'll be many within your party and beyond who still kind of hold to that. Now, Scotland seldom votes the same as England, right? Now, your party, whether we like it or not, the formation of that is mostly going to be down south and then shipped up here. Scotland's a funny place, and as the drive for independence from Scottish nationalists and individuals who just want independence, as that's gathered momentum since 2007, Scottish politics has tended to become more binary, and the binary nature of that isn't really along the isms. It's not about communism or socialism or capitalism. It is absolutely bound up in nationalism and unionism. How do you propose to kind of break that down? And I'm going to add a wee bit to that. Tommy was in last week, Tommy Sheridan. Tommy is a openly socialist. He wants to see a socialist republic in Scotland, probably similar to what you would want, only probably not as nationalistic, but at least he's got an approach to that nationalist fervour that exists in Scotland, whether you like it or whether you don't like it. What's yours? Because you're going to have to break that down. Your party will have to break that down, and I don't know how they do that when Scotland and Ulster have more akin with each other politically than Scotland and England.
It is enormously difficult, because it does have, I can see the allure of it, I can see how people do get caught up in it, and I even did myself for a little period just before the referendum, where I thought, all my pals, everybody I know is supporting this, apart from one guy, Tom Leonard, the poet, Glasgow poet Tom Leonard, and he was vociferously, against it. And I was with him, and then I just thought, well, maybe your mates are all right. I mean, it was ludicrous how I put it across to myself, because I was. William Blake became a great hero to me when I was living in London, and I did the complete works of William Blake on a radio station down there over a 2-year period, and then I thought, William Blake said he saw angels in trees and that, and who am I to say that he didn't? Mm-hmm. So maybe they're all right. And, so I sort of then came over to the side, and then Alex Salmond's speech when he was resigning, that's well, he had a whole big chunk about the Scottish Youth Theatre in his speech, and I was in the first year of the Scottish Youth Theatre, and I thought, any party that puts the Scottish Youth Theatre in the headlines and that as well, that's good enough for me. I joined that.
We did well,
but I soon learned the error of my ways and that as well. Real life showed again that it is, as I say, I look on it as a diversion that just doesn't lead us towards the whole idea that Scotland can be socialism in one country. We had the Soviet Union so the idea that Scotland can be a little socialist republic is just flying in the face of reality completely, in that we have to think on a much greater scale. And in terms of here, in Britain, a federal republic is how we should be aiming to operate. And I put this forward. There's a guy, Richard Green, who's part of a platform for socialism and independence within your party, and he said, "Oh well," he says that it does take us back to 1688, the Glorious Revolution, when the Constitution came in, and I said, "Well, that's what we've got to break. Yeah, we are taking on invested powers, and that we have to see that our only hope is to be able to scale up as much as we possibly can, as quickly as we can, and, as I say, not get diverted because it takes over. It's like nationalism, and the sort of counter it's like being pregnant. You can't be just a wee bit. You are. It leads to the thought that Scotland is different, and that Scottish people, rather than working class politics, that's how we need to be operating. And don't think that there's something magical in about the Scottish working class in comparison with anywhere else. So
a quick run through what your party might go for.
Yeah.
So would I be right in saying if the policies were about the nationalisation of what previously were state-owned organisations, so things like energy would be renationalised, travel would be renationalised. I know we've got nationalised rail to an extent, telecoms, mining, education would remain in public hands in absolute terms. Is that the kind of politics that your party would be promoting, or would there be something different?
Well, I mean, I don't know how it's going to be.
If you were in charge,
well, the policy document that just came out, they put it down to saying that there is a little handful of billionaires that in Britain that have come to dominate, and that's who we must take the power away from, rather than a capitalist system. That's what we're going to take on. It's not these individuals that are the problem, really. Right. It's a whole system, and we can't just have a sort of form of state capitalism that runs things fundamentally for the benefit still, or that system that we we've got to be democratising as much as possible, be aiming for that, and yes, the means to power being in the hands of the majority, the vast majority of people in this country and around the world are working class, and it needs, in the same way that we didn't need Jeremy or Zara just as our sort of leaders. We need a collective leadership. We need a collective mentality that we are all responsible for changing the world. We've all got to play our parts rather than doing what we're told. And the more we institute that into people, the sense that we're taking control, and we are actually gonna be genuinely taking control of the means of production. That's what we've got to be
in relation to that, because obviously, as I said, it would be unfair to put you in a position where we're trying to obviously try and lure out policy areas, because you're brand new, you're out the wrapper, and again, that development's still going to be there. Reform's still working on the premise that they'll not produce a manifesto until they run up to the Scottish election, which is practically February.
Yep.
So that's the reality of the situation, so we wouldn't be that unkind. But one thing I would ask is, where does your party sit in relation to Zach Polanski and others who are pushing this idea of wealth tax, Tam? Because the billionaires, whether we like to admit it or we don't, these individuals carry significant wealth, and if we measure that out in relation to the rest of the country, well, no wonder people are hurting. And if it's a case that your party are supportive of that, is there a case that potentially there could be work with the Greens, or could be work with others? Because ultimately, whatever government's returned in Westminster, that's the one that's ultimately going to have that decision in this. Where do you see that lying?
Well, to me, I see a sort of dividing line between us and the Greens. The Greens are a capitalist party just like the rest of them, and we've got to be independent. The thing that we need independence on is the working class organising its own party and itself to take power. That if we start moving into the areas of looking for alliances with these sorts of organisations and these sorts of parties, that then capitalism draws you in. It's like they're inevitably going to will be corrupting our politics, will be corrupting our principles of that. We need a sharp dividing line that tactically there might be support for that, but no getting involved in any form of alliances with any of the capitalist parties.
But the billionaires, again, is obviously in relation to that wealth tax.
In taxes, but then you could, and I'm the expert on these sorts of things really, but then if you start really gearing towards that's the answer, then it's making these billionaires and their wealth the solution to our problems, rather than having a system where it's impossible for them to make that sort of money. You become reliant on them. You would become reliant on their wealth in order to be able to carry on and exist. And we've got to find an alternative to that, which means about the means of production.
And again, if we look at where the left has kind of went all the last few years as well. So you've got a significant branch off into the Greens and even at a certain degree SNP, Alba.
It's become more about identity rather than
that's what I was going to say. The policy's kind of dwindled in the past, and that's what's missing in my opinion. So even though we're saying a wealth tax and that kind of thing, policy areas of somebody just coming out and actually saying, do you know what, this is what we're standing for. This is how we're going to present this. Again, whether rightly or wrongly, it's no for I'm only a mere voice, but gender issues, these issues, that issue, it seems as if there's a lot of fringe politics in Scotland where these things are taking prominence. And as I said again, I'm no part of that debate. I'm not trying to infuriate anybody or sort of offend anybody in relation to that comment, but it has to be recognised that we do need political parties to come out. And one of the things that I asked Tommy last week was as well, and I know we keep referencing back to him, but it's just because of the sort of segue into this interview with regards to the left. There isn't any political parties. The nearest I've seen is Zach Polanski to come out and just call a spade a spade. for some reason in Scottish politics we don't have that anymore. We don't have, by the way, I'm going to tell you exactly how it is, this is what we're facing, or this is how the challenges that we're dealing with, and be honest with people, because it seems as if political parties are always looking for that opportunity for spin, where they're being honest enough.
They want to be liked. They want to be liked by everyone, rather than having the courage of their convictions.
Yeah.
Because that salary scale that we spoke about there, you're saying get them on a basic salary or get them on a living wage salary or whatever it may be. You don't have many politicians in Scotland if you're actually balancing out their wages.
But it's being able to get people to see what it was. Bertolt Brecht, a communist playwright, he said in his poem in praise of communism, it's the simplest thing, so hard to achieve. And then maybe the best example of that to be able to show is the NHS. The NHS is a form of communism that's operating within society as it exists now, because it's there free as a point of use. It's there for what we need, not what is being said we can afford. And that's what needs to be extended into every area of life. And in some ways there's a Detroit activist that I picked up from a film called From Glasgow to Detroit. It's about community gardens, fantastic film. But this woman, Grace Lee Boggs, who was born on the same day as me, she in her book The Next American Revolution, she said, for the first time in history, we need a revolution for less. And it's like, people would be there for peace, bread, land, just for the absolute basics. And of course, there's a lot of people that are really struggling now, but there is also there's ludicrous sort of consumerism, and that we just need to shake off all of that and see what are the actual priorities should be in life. And I feel as if I live a quite simple life in that loads of ways. I didn't need to find, it's such an up and down life as an actor. And that
don't need a 50,000 Daytona Rolex.
No, all of that, yeah.
But the nature of, you'll know this because you're a well-read man, but the nature of capitalism is accumulation. That's it. It has no conscience. It doesn't stop. It's just a process. Yeah. You spoke there about having less, right? And I think that makes it really difficult. Much more difficult than it was in the early 20th century when poor law still existed and people were on their knees, absolutely. There was no NHS. You were in the poorhouse if you couldn't afford to live. Communism then takes effect in Russia, and you went to Russia. And you were there in 1983. Now the fall came around 89, sort of thing. So you're there at the tail end of that. What was your experience of communism in 83, 84 when you were there? And is that something that you would like to see replicated in the streets of Glasgow?
Well, in so many ways, no, because I saw the sort of lack of democracy, the lack of a sort of a driving force coming up from below and involving people. People were getting alienated over there to a massive extent, but there were still the sort of basics were being taken care of, in a way that we do need them. But we've lost so much of that. Council housing, the way that the NHS is getting sort of driven into the ground, that it's ever. Its tentacles gone out all the more, looking for ways to be able to make profit. And that is our biggest problem that we I saw, and I did feel, and that's what helped make me a communist as well. I knew that we were going to lose as a race. We were going to lose a lot by losing the Soviet Union, because there was a peace dividend, and it only lasted for about 3 months. And they're all admitting it now, that they took advantage of the situation, not to say, well, we'll take the best of that, and we'll learn the lessons of that, and we'll look after our people. No, they said, right, we don't need to bother competing with that, and the whole sense of social democracy has dwindled since then. It was the biggest defeat that we had, in the same way that the Russian Revolution was the biggest success that we've ever had as as a human race. It offered the possibility of changing the world, but it did change, but in a very sort of disfigured sort of way. And it's enormously complicated, but it is simple in ways as well. And it was the first attempt, but we have to learn all the lessons from it.
Refine.
So with that, you highlight the fact that a lack of democracy existed at that time. Now, one of the key points that would come on is your party highlight all the time about this idea of getting back in and working with local communities. We want to, and I've heard this countless occasions, get in, work with communities. But what does that mean? Because ultimately, where does that grassroots level, where does it see itself?
Well, that's what I think that politics in loads of ways has got itself divorced from people, and they can see that we need to be active and working in communities, and I've done little bits of it. Even just getting just a little taste of, like I talked about with the Children's Wood. Or even as we had a fight, the council were going to start charging people to go into the Kibble Palace in the Botanics, and we were in and out there all the time with my bear. And it was something you'd go in and out every day virtually, and that the idea we were going to have to pay every time to go in there was just out of order. And we had a campaign, Keep the Kibble Free, and that keep the kibble free. I picked up in that tune, which is "Let My People Go," and so I rewrote the words, and we had this as our theme song, and we had a picket every Saturday, and we got a lot of publicity on that score, and it looks like the council have backed in from, and so it was another wee victory. But I think that people getting activated in the way that we saw a little whiffle as well with when COP26, when that was it 26? COP26 when that came to Glasgow, that people got motivated and active, because I think people, they're only going to get motivated if they think there is a chance of winning, really, and they've seen that there is a chance of winning something here because of the scale that it's immediately been on. So we've got to build it from the bottom up, and and that's how we came across each other. The whole idea. I'm not a Ouija, so Balornock. Where is Balornock again? That as well.
Back of beyond.
But I think we have to be active in communities and being able to then. I think above all, culture-wise, it's what matters to me. And I was speaking to my Chilean communist pal. He's in London now, but he came across by Scottish miners, got him out in Pinochet and all that time, his family, and it's culture. He's been running clubs and that as well for decades now, and we need a sort of culture block within your party, and that's where my heart is, and also where my head is, because that's where I've got the experience really, in terms of combining my theatre and the culture with the politics and that as well, and so I'm trying to
is there a
recognition,
do you think, in your part? And again, I'm not being unfair because it is such at an early stage, but when I hear and that idea of people talking about working at that local level, and what does that actually mean, where I see that is having the most impact is having elected members in place on the local council, because then that way you can thrive and drive change and do all these different things. We take our own experience for talking sake within North Lanarkshire Council. Jerry and I are obviously sitting councillors. We have a very small party within North Lanarkshire Council which is very socialist orientated. But the point that I would say is, we have no opportunity. We're stonewalled. You have opposition parties that are meant to be there to hold power to account, absolutely fail at every step and toe, and then you've got an administration that's hell-bent on power and shuts down debate. So you can't even debate in the chamber anymore because mics are being muted or people are being evicted for the chamber.
They're being disabled.
Yeah. So it's that kind of power to your elbow kind of stuff. But if you're going to power to your elbow, then you're going to need the elected members to get in there and fight to make sure that obviously the policies and the practices that your party's trying to put forward is going to be deliverable.
Like the wee guy down in here.
Like the wee guy down in there, by the way, we cannot wait. We've got a good announcement for you good folks at home at the end of this, by the way. Wally Hogg.
There you go.
But as I said again, that's what's missing. It's that idea that local representative. Now, Jerry and I will attest, lots of good people in North Lanarkshire. We wouldn't even dare criticise that. But what we would say is, are these people truly representative of the individuals staying in the communities and in the schemes in North Lanarkshire? Because I'll be honest, I'm all for politics to be a broad church. Absolutely, it doesn't matter what your background is or anything at all. If you're representing your local community, you should be able to represent your local community. But when you get to North Lanarkshire and you look within that chamber, the calibre of individual is absolutely staggering. And I don't care if that gets me a standards complaint, Jerry, I'll be honest about this. The calibre of understanding and whether or no subject matter or whether it's a case of whatever, because the party whip system's in place. And people don't need to actually have any free thought because they're told what way to vote. Is the political party, and it's probably a question to you as well, is the political party system still fit for purpose at a local level? Because coming back to what you're saying, getting it back to grassroots, getting it back to this whole idea of being involved in communities, where does the political party sit within that? Because you're whipped, you can't sit and argue the case for your local ward area.
Well, I'm no whipped.
Well, of course you're.
So we left the whip. We won't be whipped.
He no whip you.
I refuse to be whipped. We refuse to even whip ourselves. I mean, that's one of the distinct characteristics about our political group. We
refuse to whip.
We refuse to have a whip system because we're individuals and we're looking to promote the very best that we can for our wards, and we'll disagree on particular matters, and that's healthy.
That's healthy
because
healthy.
That allows debate to flow, and him and I constantly disagree about things, but that helps me understand him, he understands me, and together we grow. We grow. But what happens at a local level, and North Lanarkshire will not be any different from South Lanarkshire or Glasgow or anybody, so we're not really picking on our local authority. But in an environment where one of two parties generally has dominated the political landscape, from national government to devolved government to local government to constituency offices, jobs within those constituency offices, a branch network that promotes all of that and sustains all of that, because, and we speak about this a lot, there's salary involved in that. Breaking down that system is very, very difficult. Now that's only in a Scottish context. If you're going to drive that change across the entirety of the UK, you're going to have to break down the UK aristocratic system. You're going to have to break down the peerage system. You're going to have to do away with patronage, as Tony Blair promised he was going to do in 1997, and guess what? We're still waiting. And that to me just sounds like, it sounds to me almost like too big a task. Whereas when I hear Tommy Sheridan speaking, it's almost like you could bite your way through it, rather than this large scale move towards an ultra-communist, an ultra-socialist or a communist environment. Because that would mean,
because the size and challenge of the scale of what's before.
Well, Greg, how would you disestablish it?
It'd be staggering.
That's the without blood. And I guess that's the question about real change.
But
such as the change that
the way you've described that the party system and how things operate, it was just reminding me of what the left has been like as well. These sort of little organisations that none of them are parties really. There's no been. I mean, there's not been a party really in Britain, a working class party, and it had loads and loads of faults, but it did start as a working class party, the Communist Party in 1920. And I would say organisationally has been our biggest achievement, and had a massive effect beyond its numbers. You know, that thing can happen where the right radical politics, you can do miracles. And I've seen it with the organisation that I've been involved with. That, but what really attracted me to them was their recognition that they had to have open ideological struggle amongst comrades, that you had to be arguing your corner and disagreeing, that it being built of that. They had learned it from the Communist Party of Turkey, that this necessity for disagreement, of that building through debate and differences,
growth.
And that, it's human. It's what makes us essentially human, instead of following the party line. This is what, and also ignoring everybody else that's around, you know, pretending all these other parties don't exist.
Do you know one of the scariest things about an establishment arrangement now? This carries through, as far as I'm concerned, in Westminster, carries through in Holyrood, and it certainly carries through at local authority level. And it's the contrast, or the battle between the elected member and the officer, or the civil service sort of thing. You'll have a party in power, and they want to keep everybody neat and tidy. Civil servant, they want to be friendly with civil service, friendly with the officers. And at local authority, you'll have the same with the the administration will be very friendly with the officers, because they need them to do their bidding politically. But in a two-party system, a binary system like we have here, we've got an opposition who see themselves as the administration in waiting, so they don't push either, because they don't want to make enemies of the officer or the civil servant in case they win the next election and things become difficult, and that makes things so.
I'd come back to that original point. The original point is when we're electing people now, who is it we're actually electing? Who is it that comes from my local area? Who was involved in a campaign like the Kibble? Who was involved in these different things? That's missing. You have no local individual really coming forward, and the idea of an independent being elected, don't get me wrong, Willie Hoggs broke the mould. There'll be a couple others in the country that has broken mould in relation to that, because of populism, who they are. Robert McKendrick we have in North Lanarkshire, where it's
independence.
But does it lie in independent councillors? Does it rely on independent MSPs?
Well,
is there still a place for political parties?
No, because as well as the sort of the grassroots level, it needs a programme as well, a programme for changing the world. That all the left groups have not wanted to touch having a programme, really, because it would create too much disagreement and everything. Better just have sort of what we stand for, much more simple sort of levels. And the Communist Party of Great Britain as such, its problem was that it was the British road to socialism that the CPB still has, that basically was about putting the Labour Party into power and thinking you could shift things left that way, which was, the same sort of type of illusion as the thinking we can get independence and we can build a wee socialist republic in Scotland. It had that type of allure, and it totally failed as well. But we need a programme that is understandable to people, and it being what we need now, what we demand of capitalism. But also there needs to then be a further programme, a maximum programme, where we then start to be able to get rid of the state and make us, return to what we were like for thousands, millions of years. What we were like. This is only just a tiny little, blip on the end of when we were much more essentially human. And I've picked up on that a lot. There's a group called the Radical Anthropology Group And I've learned so much from them. That it all happened in lockdown because they moved their weekly classes onto Zoom, and saw that it was the women in the tribe who said fundamentally where language came from was them saying no, forming a picket line. You can't just take us. You can't just have us. And they used red ochre as to put across ritually that I'm in menstruation now. You can't touch me. And this group has been exploring these ideas and showing the truths of where we come from, what made us human. But they are also Marxists as well, and they're good pals. They've become great pals of mine now, and that as well. And I've just then again gobsmacked that I can discover things at virtually this age and learn and
you're only a boy. You're only a laddie.
Well, I'm keeping going as long as I can. My daughter's 15, and so
You'll be glad to hear that's your hour up, Dan. That's your hour up. So listen, on behalf of myself and Jerry, thanks very much for coming in.
Absolutely, thoroughly enjoyed your company, and very welcome anytime.
Break, and then we'll be back in a wee minute. All right.